From the Curiosity rover, we now know that Mars once was a planet very much like Earth.
What we're going to announce today is that Mars is not the dry, arid planet that we thought of in the past. Today we're going to announce that under certain circumstances, liquid water has been found on Mars.
You know, that was a pretty big announcement back in September of 2015. Liquid water is considered to be a key prerequisite for life. Now they tell us it exists on another planet, one they previously insisted was way too harsh and barren. By the way, that was former Space Shuttle astronaut and Chief Scientist John Grunsfeld and Dr. Jim Green, Planetary Science Division Director. Now, I've got a lot of respect for the brain power of these guys. They'll later emphasize that they just now discovered this. I'm sorry, but I don't believe that. Look, there's something referred to as the business of science, which is about money. Not necessarily greed, but livelihood, contracts, jobs. The business of science and what is good for the advancement of mankind is not one and the same. It's important that we understand this. So, with that being said, let me show you something. Oh, there's Mars. Let's go to the other side to a place we call Gale Crater. Now, this is where the latest rover, Curiosity, landed. And what do we have here? Well, we're peering over a mountain peak with a two-dimensional image, so let's blur the foreground to help with depth of field. Now, they say they just found flowing water in 2015. But, you know, that really looks like a river back there to me. I mean, I don't know. Maybe the Russians beat us there. Maybe it's vodka. You see mountains behind it. They're green. Oh, and let's not ignore what's down in that valley. Now, I don't know under what resolution you are watching this video, but under good resolution, that really looks like a city. Sounds crazy, doesn't it? It's not. In 1989, the Soviet satellite probe Phobos 2 sent back a few interesting images before it was suddenly destroyed. One of those images was of a pattern of parallel lines and rectangles covering an area of almost 250 square miles on the surface of Mars. Dr. John Becklake of the London Science Museum described it as a city-like pattern that could easily be mistaken for an aerial view of Los Angeles. Now, as for this image, it's on NASA's website. It's part of a larger mosaic. And we're zoomed in more than 5 miles. This is how they published it, but I do not believe this to be the original. What they've done is make it very difficult to see important detail by brightening the image and reducing the contrast. All we did was try to take it back the other direction by working with those same filters in reverse. Now, the picture may not be perfectly corrected, but it's certainly a lot closer to the original than what NASA released to us. Now, before we move on, you need to take a closer look at this mountain itself. It is bizarre, folks, but it's also very real. To help you understand what you might be looking at, consider that in 2014, a scientist by the name of Dr. John Brandenburg published a theory regarding possible nuclear detonations on Mars, this being the cause of an annihilated civilization. And understand, he's not just some brainiac who came up with a seemingly crazy idea. No, this guy worked as a plasma scientist in the defense industry in the 1970s and 80s and played a big role in working with NASA on the Clementine mission to chart the far side of the moon, and has even patented space vehicle propulsion systems. Now, his theories began taking root when he became aware of specific data from Viking lander soil samples from the late 70s. This data indicated anomalies in the amount of certain isotopes that are a fingerprint of large nuclear detonations. Yeah, it gets deep here, and I won't do that to you. But something I read in his book, Death on Mars, really stuck with me as important. He says that he gave his findings to an acquaintance who worked for the Defense Intelligence Agency. After a few months, he received a simple message that asked, "Why don't you publish?" Dr. Brandenburg says this terse reply meant the government did not consider this to be classified information and were actually encouraging him to move forward with his theory. It has been his belief that the United States government is not the one suppressing the truth about Mars. Instead, he insists the issue lies mainly with two entities, JPL and MSSS. Now, everyone knows what NASA is, National Aeronautics and Space Administration, though many claim it stands for Never a Straight Answer. As for JPL, that's the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. NASA contracts with them for robotics work, landers, rovers, but not manned missions, and that's important. MSSS is the Malin Space Science Systems, and they make the cameras for JPL to use on these unmanned missions. Now, I know what pareidolia is. Hey, we all saw white Jesus in the Texas toast, okay? And we should be mindful of that. But you'll find my point to be this. There is simply way too much here to dismiss as a bunch of pareidolia lookalikes. It happens. But don't let that discourage you from also seeing the truth. Now check this out. I'm sure NASA would claim it's just another rock. But what's really cool about this rock is that it has a mouthful of teeth. Here's something that actually made the online news circuit, so you might have seen it. And really, it may or may not be a bone, okay? I don't know. But regardless, you should be even more suspect of things such as this, where objects are protruding from the surface. Have you ever gone out to the desert where nothing much ever existed? This isn't what you see. This suggests something artificial, as does this. To find a natural rock formation this symmetrically rectangular would be beyond awesome. No, you find something like this on Earth, your brain informs you that someone built something here and it fell down. And then what if you stumbled across this? Let's use the common sense area of our brains here. Not the portion that's been washed into believing this can't be, okay? You know that you're looking at a foundation of sorts, a large rectangular area where something rectangular in shape used to be. And what about this over here? Seriously? Folks, those are ruins. You know it and I know it. It's square. The top has been ripped away. We see the exposed inner walls or chambers. Debris is everywhere. Old Dr. Brandenburg might just be onto something after all. This image has been on NASA's website for a few years now. Why would they hide some things and not others? Doesn't make sense. Or does it? If these images are indeed from Mars as NASA claims, then we know this. NASA is not there looking for signs of life. They're there investigating what happened to the life that once existed there while giving us the runaround, occasionally claiming they're finding trace amounts of water, then later flowing water, etc., etc. They have to justify continuance, of course. By the way, the word on the street is that they've known about the annihilated civilization on Mars for over 40 years. Maybe, just maybe, it's been mandated they begin sharing more of Mars as it actually is, knowing only a small percentage of the world will take notice at first. This is called conditioning. And what do we have here? Well, let me explain. See this down here? Half buried in the Martian soil? We extracted this object, rotated 90 degrees, worked the contrast and sharpened, and voila. Now, since the other half appeared to be covered in dirt, and assuming it to be similar, we copied, flipped, and then slid the two pieces together, getting this. I've little doubt that this is a fallen statue representing some Martian-based entity. Now, this is likely from where it fell, and this is likely the left arm here having broken off, coming to rest upside down. And this is approximately what it would have looked like standing proud before whatever happened here happened. Now look what else we find in the midst of the debris and rubble. Now, if you don't think that's an actual head bust, that's fine. But that looks like a cornice or something like that back there behind it. Highlighted, this may very well be inscription. So I'm inviting any experts on the writing of ancient Earth, please take special notice. What do we have that is similar? We need to begin connecting the dots. It's time to stop telling yourself, this can't be. We've been lied to so much for so long that it's often difficult for us to see reality. You see this guy right here? He can be found in that first big mosaic. Over here, near more destruction. And down here. Here he is again under some different filters. Check out the detail. And while we're in the neighborhood, to the left, we find a difficult situation to wrap our heads around. I know you see that man and his shadow. Why is that human standing on the surface of Mars? He's not even wearing any environmental gear. Now I'm going to show you something you might not like at all. Can you see that on the surface? Let's break it down. Now, I believe this is actually a structure. Notice the nose, it looks to be a covered entrance or similar. Seriously, people, does this not disturb you? Take a look at that eyeball. Look at the eyelid. This is not pareidolia, and we are not the center of the universe. You have been denied the full truth regarding your own existence and origin. So, one fine Martian day, NASA rover Curiosity took this image. Take a gander at that. The ruins of something that belonged to a proud civilization, I'd say. The hillside is littered with the pieces of what was. And then down here, what is that? Help me out if you would. Is this a bio-entity or is it mechanical? And is that a weapon in its left hand? Sort of reminds me of this. It's looking right at us, right at Curiosity, as this image was being taken. And that's not the only time this has happened. Now this is from NASA's billion pixel interactive image. We added exposure. One picture is worth 1,000 words. There's countless signs of life just on this interactive image, like this guy. And if it's actually a living thing, we've reason to believe he may only be about 6 inches tall. Maybe it's just a trick of light. I don't know. Regardless, that object to the left resembles a drainage pipe. It's certainly not a natural formation. Are you starting to get the gist of what I'm trying to say here? The NASA media relations guy recently explained away about a dozen of the so-called most unexplained photos from Mars as tricks of light, and, well, one was a tiny piece of plastic they claimed broke off the rover. Now, they've used similar diversion tactics before, and I tell you, with all these rover pieces falling off, it's nothing short of a miracle the way the rovers continue to function for years. The woman who recently came forward claiming she saw live footage while working inside NASA of humans walking around on Mars, she probably did. Which gives me reason to consider this image as a possible valid issue. This single image contains what appears to be the shadow of a human wearing a backpack device. They've yet to convince me it's just a shadowy anomaly of part of the rover. It's yet to show up like this anywhere else. My guess is that it's possibly someone doing maintenance work. Could there be a coordinated worldwide conspiracy aimed at keeping us mere peons in the dark? Surely someone other than NASA has some good images from the Martian surface. Let's see. NASA has successfully landed, publicly, 6 machines on Mars that actually sent back images. Now, let's look at the list of other space agencies worldwide who have successfully done this as well. Catch my drift? This stuff isn't new to everyone. There's many who actively argue as to whether Mars was wiped out by an asteroid or similar cataclysm or by war, how long it's been since it occurred, and whether or not the planet is beginning to recover. Okay, admittedly, this looked like just a bunch of dirt and rocks to me at first too. But oh, how easily we are fooled. Very middle of the screen. That is a building. With an overhang, you can see its shadow cast to the left. Now centered is something that resembles a water tower, but regardless, it does appear to be a tower of some type. Now, that should help you to gain some perspective. There are signs of both past destruction and of current activity all over this image. The masterminds have made some things tough to see at first, but once you gain some perspective, you'll begin to recognize what you've been missing. Now, please take notice. See how squared off this is? Notice how there's a lighter colored outline and exposed area. Also, you see this orangey brown part in the middle? That's not dirt. That is photoshopped over, so to hide something that otherwise must be way too obvious. And I use the term photoshopped loosely, meaning digitally edited. It's pretty much an official verb now, okay? So, we all use it. Here we find more structures down in the valley, so I apologize. But gosh, man, look at that. Now, the largest structure to the right looks like what I'd expect to see here on Earth, while the one to the left appears alien to me. And above it, another structure similar to the last image, photoshopped over in the middle. Look at that. Now, this image alone should be enough to convince anyone that we have a problem here. Let's back away again. Do you see that? It seemed awfully out of place to me. Then I realized that's because it's airborne. I believe we're looking at the underside of a single bioentity transportation vehicle. We can see the components underneath. We already saw a similar one of these earlier. Did you catch it? It was here, helmeted and riding on something airborne between the Curiosity rover and that mountain. Here's another. This one includes a motion blur as he is moving diagonally down, left to right, straddling a vehicle. By the way, notice the ruins back there? This is from the billion pixel interactive image. And there's this guy. Over the years, NASA has somehow managed to brainwash most people into believing that everything is just a rock. Now, my personal favorite is, this is a windswept rock that looks like a bird from this angle. Yeah, it sure does, right down to the knuckles and that rock's bird feet. Look closely and you'll even see a metallic frame sheared away. But because NASA says it's just a rock, most people accept that without question. And if you happen to be perceptive enough to see past this facade publicly, you will likely encounter attacks by internet trolls barking like a bunch of pampered Pekingese. But what if I told you that in an abundance of these images, a lot of the objects we automatically accept as rocks because they indeed look like rocks at first glance, they aren't rocks at all. We are being fooled. See the image, see the Martian dirt and rocks. See the rock that initially got our attention because it looks like there's writing on it. Then see what we eventually discovered down here to the extreme far left. Now, this particular rock holds one of the keys to the truth, a clue, I believe, intentionally left for us to find. This is so important, folks. In the middle, what is that? Well, it's not something that's just sitting there on a rock. You see, it is part of the rock, or should I say, part of the actual object that is being cleverly disguised as a rock, but only loosely. Notice there are numerous areas left partially exposed. Now, they are clearly hiding something, but not 100% of it. And again, this particular area is left completely exposed. That metallic configuration you're looking at is incredible because that's the real stuff, people. Look closely and you'll see how that arrangement continues throughout much of this, barely visible through the translucent barrier that's been added to this image. Once more, I contend this to be on purpose. If they wanted to completely hide it, they would do just that. Now, here's another example. I call this the incredible balancing boulder. Now watch what happens when we hit it with a ton of exposure. By doing this, we can now differentiate between the actual object and the edited portion, which is lit up brightly. NASA would claim it's just an odd rock. NASA lies. People think I'm bat crap crazy when I tell them that most of the objects in these images aren't rocks. But I'm right. And to me, to be crazy is to blindly accept everything you're told. Someone enlighten me as to why there's a bright, shiny ball of metal sitting around on Mars. Now, that's a really strange-looking object that's likely associated with the object next to it, the one disguised as a rock. And it isn't part of the lander mechanism. We've moved far away from that by now, so don't go there. Now let's take a quick look at some other boulders that are sitting around in this same image. Look at the shapes of these things. These are not rocks. I'm not claiming there are no rocks in these images. What I'm saying is, if you look closely, you will realize there are countless objects that are artificial. They are disguised just enough to fool a brainwashed audience. And yes, Mars does have an overall red appearance when viewed from space. In contrast, planet Earth looks like a blue marble from space. Everything isn't blue when we look around on the surface, though, is it? That brings up a point. Many believe that if the Earth were to experience an all-out nuclear war, it would eventually sit dormant, taking on an oxidized, rusty red appearance. Oh, this is good. Rover Curiosity examines some rocks up close. Or something like that was the caption when NASA let this one loose. That does not look like rocks to me. That looks more like rusty old pieces of fabricated metal. But although I do believe this to be artificial, there's reason to suspect this not to be the original color nor texture once again. Let me show you why. Notice the color and texture around the edge? It has almost a concrete appearance, but on top and elsewhere we see this orangey brown coloring, and that's not dirt. That is your basic Photoshop spray paint or equivalent. Look at this. That's overspray. We've all done this. You know what it looks like. That's what it is. Some researchers believe the annihilated civilization on Mars was the equivalent to our Bronze Age civilizations, while some believe it was much more advanced. But until we're allowed to view the complete set of unadulterated images... Now, this is blatant and rare, completely untouched. A big shiny chunk of metal hidden in plain sight. Not many people are noticing though. Another boulder. Sort of looks like a cross between a boat and the Batmobile. And what do we have here? What is that on top? A rock? Wow, this is so obvious yet amazing. I really hope I've grabbed your attention here. This image is littered with debris. And over here, we have water. A creek or small river coming from up here. There's an artificial bridge going over it. Really, this image probably deserves a video all to itself. Look at this stuff they're not hiding at all. Because very few people are paying any attention. Well, how boring is that? Wait a minute. Hidden in plain sight. Just sitting there on the surface, waiting to be seen. And back there, see those straight lines and angles? Something is up with that, but there's not enough definition available to enhance. However, we came across this shot and recognized it as being of that same region, and this time we were able to break through. I hope you're getting an idea as to just how widespread of a cover-up this is. When I first began examining images from Mars rovers, I had no idea there would be this much going on. Maybe some evidence here or there, a few images where someone blurred or skewed something away. That's just not what I found. Remember how I suggested we not allow the fact that we do sometimes tend to see things that aren't what we really thought they were, but not to let that get in the way of actually seeing the truth? We all probably see the same thing here. No, it's not a body in a shallow grave. But over here, don't get distracted and miss out on the prize. By now, you should have a basic idea as to what is happening here. The main point being, something is going on Mars regarding past and quite possibly present life. The time has come for us to relearn who we really are, because we've lost track of the full truth. And there are answers awaiting us on Mars, and it's right next door. There are those who have known about this for many years and kept it from us. Therefore, this might be the most pretentious act of selfishness in the history of our species. Think about it. This truth belongs to us. Don't be surprised if it's not all about money and egos. Remember what we said about JPL and how they only contract with NASA for manned missions? They know that once life on Mars is found and publicized, a manned mission will be in order, which means they're out. There's an old industry saying, life on Mars means death for JPL. See, they're also the ones who lied about the original face on Mars. While a group of legitimate scientists risked their reputations trying to prove to the world that this was indeed artificial, JPL fought hard trying to make these guys look like fools. It got so heated that a JPL employee once tried to physically attack one of these scientists because of the 3D image they'd created of the face. Bet you didn't know about that, did you? Something else you should know about at this time is in regards to Mars' two irregularly shaped moons, Phobos and Deimos, especially Phobos, the larger of the two. Back in the 1960s, Soviet astrophysicist Dr. Joseph Shklovsky first calculated the orbital motion of Phobos. After years of study, he realized that Phobos' orbital velocity and position no longer matched the mathematically predicted position. His conclusion was that Phobos was likely not the captured asteroid as previously believed, but instead was a somewhat hollow object. Remember earlier in the presentation when we mentioned the Soviet orbiter that was destroyed? The orbiter's name was Phobos 2, named after the Martian moon, and it had just showed up to investigate this moon when it was suddenly lost, but not before sending back those telling images. More recently, the European Space Agency did their own extensive study of this Martian moon. Their report stated, in part, "We conclude that the interior of Phobos likely contains large voids. When applied to various hypotheses bearing on the origin of Phobos, these results are inconsistent with the proposition that Phobos is a captured asteroid." So, the ESA now concludes that Phobos is somewhat hollow and cannot be a captured asteroid, yet we are still told by NASA that it is likely a captured asteroid. Wow. And through other independent studies, many are convinced that both Phobos and its sister moon, Deimos, are fabricated satellites, artificial. Maybe this isn't as far-fetched a notion as we once would have thought. Info from good sources suggests that the survivors of the Martian genocide eventually found their way to Earth. Now, could this be true? And was there really a war? Consider the city of Cairo, Egypt, known as the cradle of civilization. That name, Cairo. One of the definitions of the full name is place or camp of Mars. And in ancient Roman religion and myth, Mars was the god of war. Now, that could all, of course, be coincidence. I realize that some people are leery of the Mars subject because of the risk of ridicule. I personally don't care. And some people couldn't care less about Mars, and that's fine. Most people, though, just don't know. They haven't seen what you just witnessed. So take a chance and share this with someone, because more people need to be made aware that we are indeed being kept from the truth. It's important that we expedite a quicker disclosure from those who are suppressing our truth. I'd like to thank my amazing and beautiful other half for putting up with me during all of this. She's been a great sport. And because of that, I'll let her have the honor. Missy, beam me home.